The next afternoon, Ethan was mopping the hallway near the chemistry lab when he smelled something strange. At first, it was faint, just a whiff of something sharp and acrid, but as he turned the corner, the smell grew stronger. Smoke curled under the door of the lab, thin at first but quickly thickening. Panic surged through him as he realized what was happening. Fire! Ethan shouted, dropping his mop and rushing toward the door. He yanked on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Someone must have locked it from the inside. His heart raced as he pounded on the metal surface. Is anyone in there? For a moment, there was no answer. Then he heard coughing weak and raspy from the other side. It was Mia. She had stayed late to finish a project for extra credit, just like she always did. Ethan's stomach dropped. If she was trapped in there with the fire spreading, she wouldn't last long. Without wasting another second, Ethan ran to the janitor's closet and grabbed a fire extinguisher. The smoke was already filling the hallway, stinging his eyes and making it hard to breathe. But he didn't care. He had to get to Mia. Gripping the extinguisher tightly, he kicked the door as hard as he could. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th kick, the lock gave way and the door swung open. Inside, the room was chaos. Flames licked at the shelves, consuming bottles of chemicals that sizzled and popped. Thick black smoke filled the air, choking everything in its path. Through the haze, Ethan spotted Mia crouched near the far wall, clutching her arm and coughing violently. Her face was pale, streaked with soot, and her glasses were askew. "Mia!" Ethan called out, his voice hoarse from the smoke. "Stay low and follow my voice." She looked up, disoriented, but nodded weakly. Using his shirt to cover his nose and mouth, Ethan crouched down and moved toward her. Every step felt like an eternity, the heat pressing against his skin as the fire roared around them. When he reached Mia, he knelt beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "We've got to go," he said firmly, helping her to her feet. "Stay close to me." Mia nodded again, leaning heavily on him as they made their way back toward the door. The smoke was unbearable now, blinding and suffocating. Ethan focused on putting one foot in front of the other, guiding Mia through the inferno. Just as they reached the doorway, a loud crack echoed above them. Ethan glanced up in time to see part of the ceiling collapse, blocking the entrance completely. For a split second, fear froze him in place. They were trapped, but then he remembered the window. The chemistry lab was on the ground floor, and there was a small window near the supply closet. It wasn't big, but it might be their only chance. "This way!" Ethan shouted, pulling Mia along. They stumbled toward the window, dodging falling debris and bursts of flame. When they reached it, Ethan used the fire extinguisher to smash the glass. Shards rained down, glinting like diamonds in the flickering light. He cleared away the jagged edges as best he could before turning to Mia. "You're going first," he told her, boosting her up onto the ledge. She hesitated, trembling, but obeyed. With a little push from Ethan, she tumbled out into the grass. Outside. He followed quickly, landing awkwardly on his knees, but ignoring the pain dot as soon as they were clear of the building. Ethan pulled Mia farther away from the flames. Students and teachers gathered nearby, shouting and pointing at the burning lab. Someone must have already called the fire department, because sirens wailed in the distance. Ethan collapsed onto the ground, gasping for fresh air, while Mia sat beside him, shaking uncontrollably. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked between breaths, looking her over for injuries. Aside from some cuts on her hands and a nasty bruise forming on her arm, she seemed mostly unharmed. I'm fine," Mia stammered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Ethan. You saved my life." Ethan shook his head, embarrassed by the praise. Anyone would have done the same. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Most people would have run the other way, leaving Mia to fend for herself. Even Jake Miller probably wouldn't have risked his own safety for someone like her, or anyone, for that matter. Still, Ethan didn't say any of that. All that mattered was that Mia was safe. By the time the firefighters arrived, the blaze had engulfed most of the lab. They worked quickly, dousing the flames with water and foam until the fire was finally under control. Principal Carter approached Ethan and Mia, his face pale with shock. "What happened here?" he demanded, his voice tight with worry. "There was a fire in the lab," Ethan explained, still catching his breath. "I found Mia trapped inside and helped her get out." Principal Carter nodded, looking both relieved and horrified. "You two are very lucky to be alive. We'll need to investigate how this started, but for now, I want you both to go home and rest." "This has been a traumatic experience," Ethan agreed, though he doubted he'd sleep anytime soon. As he walked Mia to her car, she stopped suddenly and turned to face him. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly, her blue eyes shining with gratitude. "If you hadn't come in when you did." "You don't have to thank me," Ethan interrupted gently. "Just promise me you'll be careful, okay? And maybe stop coming to school so early or staying so late. It's not worth the risk." Mia smiled faintly, nodding. "I'll try." "But seriously, Ethan, thank you. I won't forget this." As she drove away, Ethan stood there for a moment, watching the flashing lights of the fire trucks reflect off the wet pavement. People were staring at him now, whispering about what had happened. Some looked impressed. Others seemed skeptical. Ethan didn't care about any of that. He had done what needed to be done, and that was enough. The next day at school, word of Ethan's heroics had spread like wildfire, pun intended. Students who had barely acknowledged him before now greeted him in the halls, slapping him on the back and calling him brave. Teachers praised him during class, and even Principal Carter mentioned his actions during the morning announcements. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he belonged somewhere, but not everyone was happy about it. Jake Miller, for instance, couldn't stand the attention Ethan was getting. During lunch, Ethan noticed Jake glaring at him from across the cafeteria, his jaw clenched tightly. Ethan ignored him, focusing instead on eating his sandwich. He didn't have time for Jake's jealousy or anger, not after everything that had happened. Later that afternoon, Ethan was cleaning the gymnasium when Jake stormed in, slamming the door behind him. Ethan straightened up, gripping his broom nervously as Jake approached. "So you're the big hero now, huh?" Jake sneered, crossing his arms. "Saving damsels in distress? Real classy." Ethan shrugged, trying to stay calm. "I just did what anyone else would have done." "Yeah, right," Jake snapped, taking a step closer. "You think you're better than me now? Is that it?" "No," Ethan replied evenly. "I don't think I'm better than anyone. I just wanted to help Mia." Jake's face twisted with rage. "Well, newsflash, bro, it doesn't make you special. People will forget about you in a week. Trust me." Ethan didn't respond. He knew Jake was wrong, but arguing wouldn't change anything. Instead, he went back to sweeping the floor, pretending Jake wasn't there. After a few tense moments, Jake muttered something under his breath and stormed out, slamming the door again on his way. Despite Jake's threats, Ethan couldn't deny that things were changing. For once, he wasn't invisible. People actually noticed him, and not just because he was the janitor kid. They saw him as someone who cared, someone willing to take risks for others. It was a strange feeling, but not an unpleasant one. That evening, Ethan told his mom about the fire and how he'd saved Mia. She listened intently, her eyes wide with concern and pride. "Oh, Ethan," she said when he finished, hugging him tightly. "I'm so proud of you. But please, promise me you'll be careful. You could have been hurt or worse." "I know, Mom," Ethan assured her, returning the hug. "But I couldn't just leave her in there. I had to do something." His mom sighed, shaking her head. "You've always been too kind for your own good. Just don't let it get you into trouble, okay? Ethan smiled faintly. I'll try. As he lay in bed that night, Ethan replayed the events of the past 2 days. In his mind, saving Mia had been terrifying, exhausting, and dangerous, but it had also been rewarding in a way he hadn't expected. For the first time, he felt like he'd made a real difference in someone's life. Maybe that was all that mattered. Little did he know, his act of bravery was about to change his world in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. Years passed, and Ethan Brooks became a name people recognized, not just in his community, but beyond. After graduating at the top of his class, he landed a job at a leading tech company known for its innovative solutions to global challenges. His role was challenging but fulfilling, allowing him to use his skills to create tools that improved lives. Yet, despite his success, Ethan never forgot where he came from or the people who had helped him along the way. One of the first things Ethan did after starting his career was establish a scholarship fund. He named it the Mia Thompson Scholarship, honoring the girl who had inspired so much of his journey. The fund provided financial assistance to underprivileged students pursuing degrees in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. STEM. For Ethan, it was a way to give back to ensure that kids like him wouldn't have to struggle as much as he once had. The Harpers were thrilled when they heard about the scholarship. "You're making us proud, Ethan," Mr. Harper said during one of their regular dinners at the mansion. "This is exactly the kind of legacy we hoped you'd build." Ethan smiled humbly, shaking his head. "I couldn't have done any of this without your support. This scholarship is as much yours as it is mine." Mrs. Harper reached across the table, patting his hand affectionately. "Nonsense. You earned every bit of this. We just gave you a push. The rest is all you." Mia, now a successful scientist, working on groundbreaking renewable energy projects, joined Ethan in promoting the scholarship. Together, they visited schools across the country, sharing their story with students who needed to hear it most. They talked about resilience, kindness, and the importance of believing in yourself even when no one else did. During one such visit, Ethan stood before a group of high school seniors in a small town, not unlike the one he'd grown up in. The room was quiet, the students listening intently as he spoke. "When I was your age," Ethan began, "I didn't think I'd amount to much. I worked as a janitor, and most days, I felt invisible. But something changed when I realized I could make a difference, not just for myself, but for others. That realization gave me purpose. It taught me that success isn't about money or fame, it's about the impact you leave behind." A young girl in the front row raised her hand hesitantly. "What if people don't believe in you?" she asked softly. "What if they say you can't do it?" Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her question. "There will always be doubters," he replied honestly. "But here's the thing, you don't need everyone to believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself. And if you stay true to who you are, the right people will see your potential. Trust me, I've been there." The girl smiled faintly, and Ethan could tell his words had resonated with her. Moments like these reminded him why he kept doing this work. It wasn't about recognition or praise. It was about showing others that they mattered, that their dreams were worth fighting for. As time went on, Ethan's influence grew. He started speaking at conferences, sharing insights about innovation, education, and social responsibility. His speeches were heartfelt and relatable, drawing audiences in with stories of his humble beginnings and the obstacles he'd overcome. People admired him not just for his achievements, but for his humility and dedication to helping others. Back home, Ethan stayed connected to his roots. He continued volunteering at the same community center where he'd mentored kids during college. Many of those children had grown up now, some even attending universities thanks to the Mia Thompson Scholarship. Whenever Ethan saw them succeed, he felt a deep sense of pride, not because he'd played a part in their journey, but because they'd proven themselves capable of greatness. His mom remained his biggest cheerleader, always reminding him to stay grounded. "You're still the same boy who cleaned floors at Lincoln High," she told him one evening over dinner. "Don't let success change that." "It won't," Ethan promised, smiling. "How could it? You raised me better than that." Their bond remained unshakable, a testament to the sacrifices they'd made together. Ethan often thought about how different their lives might have been without the Harpers' intervention. He owed them so much, but more importantly, he owed it to himself to honor their generosity by living a life of purpose. Ryan and Lily Harper also stayed close to Ethan, treating him like family. Ryan often joked that Ethan was the little brother he never had, while Lily admired his commitment to giving back. "You inspire me to do better," she admitted once, "to think bigger." Ethan laughed, brushing off the compliment. "I'm just doing what feels right. If anything, you guys inspire me." Despite his accomplishments, Ethan faced moments of doubt. There were days when imposter syndrome crept in, whispering that he didn't belong among the brilliant minds he worked alongside. But whenever those thoughts surfaced, he remembered Jake Miller, the bully who had tried to tear him down, and how far he'd come since then. Those memories fueled his determination to keep pushing forward. By the time Ethan turned 30, he had built a life he could be proud of. He lived in a modest apartment filled with books, gadgets, and photos of loved ones. His relationships with Mia, the Harpers, and his mom were stronger than ever. And though he had achieved professional success, he valued his personal connections above all else. At a charity gala one evening, Ethan stood on stage addressing a room full of supporters. The event aimed to raise funds for STEM education programs in underserved communities, a cause close to his heart. As he looked out at the audience, he spotted familiar faces: Mia, sitting beside her parents, Ryan and Lily Harper, smiling proudly, and his mom, tears glistening in her eyes. "I used to think success meant having money or status," Ethan said, his voice steady and sincere. "But I've learned that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in the lives we touch and the legacies we leave behind. Every child deserves a chance to dream big, to believe they can achieve something extraordinary. And it's our responsibility to help them get there." The crowd erupted into applause, but Ethan barely noticed. He was too focused on the faces of the people who mattered most, the ones who had shaped his journey and reminded him of what truly mattered. After the speech, Mia approached him, her eyes shining with emotion. "You're amazing, Ethan," she said simply. "You've changed so many lives, including mine." Ethan shook his head, embarrassed by the praise. "We've changed each other's lives, Mia. None of this would have been possible without you, or the Harpers, or my mom. It's not about one person. It's about all of us working together." Mia nodded, squeezing his hand. "Well, whatever it is, I'm glad we're in this together." As the night wound down, Ethan stepped outside onto the balcony, taking a moment to breathe in the cool air. Below him, the city lights twinkled like stars, stretching endlessly into the horizon. He thought about how far he'd come from mopping floors at Lincoln High to standing on stages, inspiring others to chase their dreams. Life hadn't been easy, and it likely never would be. But Ethan knew he had the strength to face whatever came next. With the support of those he loved and the values instilled in him by his mom, he was ready to tackle new challenges and continue building a legacy rooted in kindness, courage, and resilience. For Ethan Brooks, the future was bright and it belonged to everyone willing to fight for it. The trial against Jake Miller dragged on for months, but eventually, the truth came out. Investigators uncovered a string of texts between Jake and a friend, bragging about how he planned to teach Ethan a lesson by framing him for the fire. The evidence was damning, and Jake's lies crumbled under scrutiny. The judge ruled in Ethan's favor, clearing his name completely. But even after the verdict, Ethan couldn't shake the lingering unease. For weeks, he'd been questioned, doubted, and judged not just by strangers, but by people he thought knew him better. Some classmates still whispered behind his back, unwilling to let go of their skepticism. It was as if Jake's accusations had planted seeds of doubt that refused to die. No matter how much proof there was to the contrary, Ethan tried to focus on school and push past the negativity, but it wasn't easy. During lectures, he caught himself zoning out, replaying the trial in his mind. At night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd ever truly escape the shadow of that day. He hated feeling like a victim again, like someone else held power over his life. But deep down, he knew the only way to move forward was to keep proving himself, to show everyone, including himself, that he was stronger than this. Ryan Harper noticed the change in Ethan almost immediately. When they met up one Saturday afternoon at a coffee shop near campus, Ryan didn't waste time getting straight to the point. "You're not okay," he said bluntly, setting down his cup. "What's going on?" Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to share. He didn't want to burden Ryan with his problems, especially since the Harpers had already done so much for him. But something about Ryan's steady gaze made him feel safe, like he could say anything without fear of judgment. "It's just hard," Ethan admitted finally, fiddling with the edge of his napkin. "I know I'm innocent, and the court proved it. But some people still don't believe me. They look at me differently now, like I'm guilty until proven otherwise." Ryan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "That's human nature, unfortunately. People love drama. It gives them something to talk about. But you can't let their opinions define you. You know who you are, Ethan. That's all that matters." "I know," Ethan replied quietly. "But it's exhausting, you know? Fighting to prove myself over and over again." Ryan nodded sympathetically. "I get it. Trust me, I do. But here's the thing, you've already proven yourself. To us, to Mia, to anyone who really matters. The rest is just noise. Don't let it distract you from your goals." Ethan smiled faintly, grateful for Ryan's wisdom. "Thanks, I needed to hear that." As the semester progressed, Ethan threw himself into his studies and extracurricular activities. He spent long hours in the robotics lab, working on projects that challenged him both mentally and creatively. His team was developing a prototype for an affordable prosthetic hand designed for children in low-income communities. It was ambitious, but Ethan loved every minute of it. Seeing the potential impact of their work gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt before. Mia continued to be a source of support, too. She called or texted regularly, checking in on him and sharing updates about her own life. Her research on renewable energy sources had earned her recognition from professors, and she was invited to present her findings at a national conference. Ethan couldn't have been prouder of her. "You're amazing, you know that?" he told her during one of their late-night chats. "All those kids at Lincoln High used to tease you, and now look at you changing the world." Mia laughed softly. "Don't give me too much credit. I'm just doing what I love. And besides, you're the one making headlines with your inventions." "Yeah, well, we're both pretty great," Ethan joked, grinning. "Maybe we should start a company together someday." "Deal," Mia replied, her tone playful. "But only if you promise to split the profits 50-50. Their friendship had grown stronger over the years, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. Ethan cherished it more than ever, knowing how rare it was to find someone who truly understood him. Back home, Ethan's mom noticed the changes in him too. When he visited during winter break, she pulled him aside one evening while they were washing dishes together. "You seem different," she said, drying her hands on a towel. "More confident. Did something happen at school?" Ethan shrugged, thinking about everything he'd been through, the trial, the doubts, the hard work it took to keep moving forward. "I guess I'm just learning to trust myself more," he admitted. "Before, I always cared too much about what other people thought. Now I realize I can't control that. All I can do is focus on what I know is right." His mom smiled, proudly pulling him into a hug. "That's my boy. I'm so proud of you, Ethan. You've come such a long way." The praise warmed him, but it also reminded him of how far he still had to go. College was challenging, and there were days when he felt like giving up. But every time he thought about quitting, he remembered the sacrifices his mom had made, the faith the Harpers had placed in him, and the dreams he'd worked so hard to achieve. Those reminders kept him grounded, pushing him to keep going no matter how tough things got. By the time spring arrived, Ethan had found a new rhythm. He balanced his coursework, research projects, and volunteer work with surprising ease. On weekends, he often visited local schools, talking to students about the importance of education and perseverance. Many of them reminded him of his younger self, kids who doubted their abilities because of where they came from or what others said about them. One Saturday morning, Ethan stood in front of a group of middle schoolers at a community center, holding up a small robot he'd built. "This guy right here," he said, pointing to the blinking lights on its chest, "started as nothing more than wires and screws. But with patience and effort, I turned it into something that moves, thinks, and solves problems." The kids stared, wide-eyed, captivated by his words. One boy raised his hand timid. Ethan's life changed faster than he could have imagined. With the Harpers' support, he enrolled in a prestigious university just a few months after graduating from Lincoln High School. At first, everything felt overwhelming. The campus was massive, with towering buildings and sprawling green lawns where students lounged between classes. Everyone seemed so confident, walking around with expensive laptops and designer backpacks. Ethan stuck out like a sore thumb in his second-hand clothes and scuffed sneakers. He tried not to let it bother him. After all, he wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here to learn. But adjusting to college life wasn't easy. His classmates came from wealthy families and had grown up attending private schools. They spoke about internships, study abroad programs, and networking events as if these things were normal parts of life. For Ethan, they might as well have been speaking another language. Ryan Harper became a lifeline during those early days. Though Ryan was busy with his own work, he made time to check in with Ethan regularly, offering advice on how to navigate the challenges of campus life. "It's okay to feel out of place," Ryan told him one afternoon over coffee. "Everyone feels that way at first. Just focus on your goals, and don't let anyone make you doubt yourself." Ethan appreciated the encouragement, but it didn't stop the doubts from creeping in. During lectures, he often found himself struggling to keep up with the material. His high school education hadn't prepared him for the advanced coursework, and he spent long nights in the library trying to catch up. There were moments when he wondered if he'd made a mistake accepting the Harpers' offer. What if he couldn't handle this? What if he let them down? But then he remembered why he was there, not just for himself, but for his mom, who had worked tirelessly to give him a chance at a better life. He thought about Mia, whose quiet strength reminded him that resilience mattered more than privilege. And he thought about the Harpers, who believed in him even when he doubted himself. Slowly but surely, Ethan began to find his footing. Back home, things were improving too. Thanks to the financial relief provided by the Harpers, Ethan's mom no longer had to work double shifts at the diner. She found a steady job closer to their apartment, one that allowed her to spend more time with Ethan whenever he visited. Their small apartment still felt cramped, but it was filled with warmth and laughter again, something Ethan hadn't realized he'd missed until now. Despite the progress, Ethan refused to forget where he came from. On weekends, he volunteered at a local community center, tutoring kids who reminded him of his younger self. Many of them struggled with school or came from broken homes, just like he had. Seeing their faces light up when they finally understood a difficult concept gave Ethan a sense of purpose. It reminded him that success wasn't just about personal achievement, it was about lifting others up along the way. Not everyone appreciated Ethan's efforts, though. Some of his former classmates resented his sudden rise, accusing him of forgetting his roots. "You think you're better than us now?" One boy sneered when Ethan stopped by his old neighborhood to help clean up the park. "You've gone fancy hanging out with rich people." Ethan sighed, brushing dirt off his hands as he stood up. "I'm not better than anyone," he replied calmly. "I'm just trying to make the most of an opportunity. That doesn't mean I've forgotten where I came from." The boy rolled his eyes but didn't argue further. Still, the comment stung. Ethan knew some people would never understand his journey or approve of it, but he refused to let their opinions define him. He focused instead on the people who mattered: his mom, Mia, the Harpers, and the kids he mentored. As the semester wore on, Ethan grew more comfortable in his new environment. He joined a robotics club where he met other students passionate about engineering. Together, they worked on projects designed to solve real-world problems, like creating affordable water filtration systems for developing countries. For the first time, Ethan felt like he belonged somewhere, not because of what he wore or how much money he had, but because of what he contributed. Mia stayed in touch, sending him emails and texts to check in. She was thriving in her own studies, pursuing a degree in biology with dreams of becoming a scientist. Her letters were full of excitement and curiosity, and Ethan loved reading about her discoveries. Sometimes they Skyped late at night, talking about their classes, professors, and hopes for the future. "You're doing amazing," Mia said during one of their calls. "I can't believe how far you've come. It's thanks to you." Ethan joked, smiling. "If you hadn't needed saving that day, none of this would have happened." Mia laughed softly. "Don't sell yourself short. You earned every bit of this, Ethan. Don't ever forget that." Her words stuck with him, echoing in his mind whenever self-doubt crept in. Maybe she was right. Maybe he deserved this chance after all. By the end of his first year, Ethan had proven himself both academically and socially. His grades improved significantly, and he formed close friendships with several classmates. Even professors began to take notice of his dedication and creativity. One of them, Dr. Carter, offered Ethan a research assistant position for the summer, a role typically reserved for upperclassmen. When Ethan told the Harpers about the opportunity, they beamed with pride. "We always knew you had it in you," Mrs. Harper said, hugging him tightly. "This is just the beginning, Ethan." But not everything was smooth sailing. As Ethan settled into his new life, shadows from his past began to surface. Jake Miller, who had barely graduated from high school, was arrested for starting fights at a local bar. News spread quickly, and soon rumors linked Jake to the fire in the chemistry lab. Investigators reopened the case, questioning whether Jake might have been involved or at least known more than he claimed. One evening, Ethan received a call from Detective Harris, who asked to meet him at the police station. Nervously, Ethan agreed, wondering what this could mean. When he arrived, the detective explained that Jake had accused Ethan of starting the fire intentionally to look like a hero. "What?" Ethan exclaimed, stunned. "That's ridiculous. Why would I do that?" "We know it sounds absurd," Detective Harris said, holding up a hand. "But we need to clear your name officially. Can you tell us anything about what happened that day?" Ethan recounted the events as clearly as he could, emphasizing how he'd risked his life to save Mia. The detective nodded, taking notes. "Thank you, Ethan. We'll look into this further and make sure justice is served." Leaving the station, Ethan felt uneasy. He trusted the authorities to handle the situation, but the accusation weighed heavily on him. What if people started believing Jake's lies? What if his reputation and the trust the Harpers placed in him was damaged beyond repair? Over the next few weeks, reporters hounded Ethan for interviews, eager to sensationalize the story. Some classmates whispered behind his back, casting suspicious glances his way. Even Ryan noticed the tension during one of their phone calls. "Are you okay?" Ryan asked, concern evident in his voice. You sound stressed. It's nothing, Ethan lied, forcing a laugh. Just school stuff. But Ryan wasn't. Convinced. Listen, whatever's going on, you don't have to face it alone. We're here for you, Ethan. Always. Ethan swallowed hard, touched by the reminder. Thanks, Ryan, I'll be fine. In court, evidence eventually proved Jake's involvement in the arson plot. Text messages revealed his jealousy toward Ethan and his desire to frame him for the fire. The judge dismissed Jake's accusations, clearing Ethan's name once and for all. While the verdict restored his reputation, the experience left scars. Ethan realized how fragile trust could be and vowed to remain vigilant against those who sought to tear him down. Through it all, Ethan emerged stronger and more determined than ever. He knew adversity would always be part of life, but he also knew he had the strength to overcome it. With the support of the Harpers, Mia, and his own unwavering resolve, he continued moving forward, one step at a time. As he walked across campus one crisp autumn morning, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just a janitor's son anymore. He was a student, a mentor, and a dreamer. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them head-on. A few weeks had passed since the fire at Lincoln High School, and life seemed to have settled into a new rhythm for Ethan Brooks. The attention he'd received from saving Mia had died down somewhat, though people still gave him nods of respect in the hallways. Even Jake Miller kept his distance, which was fine with Ethan. He didn't need drama or conflict. He just wanted things to go back to normal. But normal wasn't something Ethan could rely on anymore. One Friday evening, as he finished cleaning the school gymnasium, he noticed a sleek black car pull up outside the building. It was the kind of car that never came to places like Lincoln High, a luxury sedan with shiny rims and tinted windows. Ethan paused, leaning on his mop as the driver stepped out. The man was tall and well-dressed, wearing a tailored suit that looked expensive even from a distance. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his posture radiated confidence. Ethan frowned, wondering why someone like this would show up at the school. Curiosity got the better of him, so he walked toward the entrance to see what was going on. "Can I help you?" Ethan asked cautiously, gripping the handle of his mop like a shield. Man smiled warmly, extending a hand. "Yes, you can. My name is William Harper. I'm here to speak with Ethan Brooks." Ethan blinked, taken aback. "That's me," he said slowly, shaking the man's hand. "What's this about?" Mr. Harper's smile widened. "Perhaps we could talk somewhere more private? Or, if you prefer, I can give you a ride home. Your mother has already agreed to meet us there." "My mom?" Ethan repeated, confused. "Wait, how do you know her?" "All will be explained soon," Mr. Harper assured him. "Please, trust me, it's nothing bad. In fact, it's quite the opposite." Though hesitant, Ethan decided to go along with it. Something about Mr. Harper's calm demeanor made him feel safe, even though he had no idea what was going on. They climbed into the car, and Ethan couldn't help but marvel at the plush leather seats and the faint scent of polished wood. This was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. As they drove, Mr. Harper explained who he was. "I'm part of the Harper family," he said simply. "We own several businesses in the area. You may not have heard of us, but we've been involved in the community for generations." Ethan nodded politely, though none of this meant much to him. He lived a modest life. Names like Harper didn't carry weight in his world. Still, he listened intently, trying to piece together why this man was suddenly interested in him. When they arrived at Ethan's apartment complex, his mom was waiting outside. She looked nervous but happy, standing beside another woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Harper. There was also a younger man and a young woman with them, both smiling warmly. Ethan shook hands with everyone, feeling increasingly out of place. Among these polished strangers, what's all this about? Ethan finally asked as they sat down in the cramped living room. His mom squeezed his shoulder reassuringly before turning to Mr. Harper. "We wanted to thank you personally." Mr. Harper began, his tone sincere. "You saved our niece's life." Ethan's eyes widened. "Your niece?" "Yes," Mr. Harper confirmed. "Mia Thompson is my brother's daughter. When we heard about what happened, the fire, how you risked your life to get her out, we knew we had to express our gratitude." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. "I just did what anyone would have done," he mumbled, echoing what he'd told others countless times before. Mr. Harper chuckled softly. "Perhaps. But most people wouldn't have acted so bravely. That's why we wanted to invite you and your mother to dinner tomorrow night at our home. We'd love to get to know you better." Ethan glanced at his mom, who looked thrilled yet slightly overwhelmed. Dinner at the Harpers' house sounded surreal, almost like stepping into another world entirely. But the kindness in their eyes convinced him to accept. The next evening, Ethan and his mom arrived at the Harper estate, a sprawling mansion surrounded by perfectly manicured lawns and towering oak trees. Ethan felt completely out of place in his jeans and borrowed button-up shirt, but the Harpers greeted them warmly, making sure they felt welcome. Inside, the house was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings and paintings lined the walls. A grand staircase curved upward, leading to rooms Ethan couldn't even imagine. Despite the opulence, the atmosphere was warm and inviting, thanks largely to Mrs. Harper, who had a way of putting people at ease. During dinner, Ethan learned more about the family. Lily, the youngest daughter, was studying medicine and dreamed of opening free clinics in underserved areas. Ryan, the older son, worked in finance but spent much of his free time mentoring kids from low-income neighborhoods. Both siblings were friendly and eager to include Ethan in their conversations, asking about his interests and goals. At one point, Mr. Harper turned to Ethan with a serious expression. "Ethan, we want to do more than just thank you. We want to invest in your future." Ethan froze, unsure what that meant. "Invest in me?" "Yes," Mr. Harper replied. "We believe you have potential, and we'd like to help you achieve your dreams. If you're interested, we'll cover the cost of your college education, tuition, books, housing, everything. All we ask is that you work hard and make the most of this opportunity." For a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. College had always seemed impossible, a dream too far out of reach for someone like him. Yet here was this wealthy family offering to change his entire life with a single gesture. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes, and he struggled to find words. I don't know what to say," he stammered, looking at his mom, who was crying openly now. "Thank you doesn't seem enough." "You don't need to thank us," Mrs. Harper said gently. "Just promise us you'll use this chance wisely. That's all we want." Ethan nodded, overwhelmed but determined. "I promise. I won't let you down." After dinner, Ethan and his mom were given a tour of the mansion. They marveled at the library filled with books, the music room with its grand piano, and the backyard pool that shimmered under the moonlight. For Ethan, it felt like stepping into a movie, a world where people lived without worry or struggle. Before leaving, Mr. Harper handed Ethan an envelope containing information about universities and scholarship programs. "Take your time deciding," he said. "And remember, we're here to support you every step of the way." On the drive home, Ethan stared out the window, his mind racing. Everything felt surreal, like a dream he might wake up from at any moment, but deep down, he knew this was real. The Harpers had changed his life forever, giving him a chance to escape the cycle of poverty and hardship that had defined his existence for so long. His mom reached over and squeezed his hand. "You deserve this, Ethan," she said softly. "All those years of working so hard, being kind to others, doing the right thing, it's paying off now." Ethan smiled faintly, feeling a mix of excitement and responsibility. He didn't fully understand why the Harpers had chosen to help him, but he vowed to honor their generosity. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he would prove himself worthy of their trust. That night, as Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about the road ahead. College would be difficult, especially coming from a background like his. But he wasn't afraid of hard work. He'd faced tougher odds before and come out stronger. With the Harpers' support and his own determination, he knew he could succeed. For the first time in his life, Ethan allowed himself to dream big. Maybe he'd study engineering like he'd always wanted. Maybe he'd invent something amazing or build projects that helped people. Whatever the future held, one thing was certain: he wouldn't waste this opportunity. Not only for himself, but for his mom, who had sacrificed so much to raise him. As sleep finally claimed him, Ethan drifted off with a sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time, he believed he could face them head on, and maybe, just maybe, he could build a brighter future, not just for himself, but for everyone counting on him. Ethan Brooks was not the kind of person who stood out in a crowd. At 17 years old, he was tall but lean, with messy brown hair that always seemed to fall into his eyes no matter how many times he pushed it back. His clothes were simple jeans and t-shirts, usually faded from too many washes, and his sneakers had seen better days. Ethan didn't mind, though. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. His life was about survival, not style. Every weekday after school, Ethan worked as a janitor at Lincoln High School. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills, or at least helped ease some of the pressure on his mom, who worked double shifts at a diner just to keep food on their table. Ethan didn't complain. He knew they were lucky to have what little they did. Still, there were moments when he wished things could be different, especially when kids like Jake Miller made fun of him for being the janitor kid. Jake Miller was everything Ethan wasn't, or rather, everything Ethan thought people wanted him to be. Jake was the star quarterback of the football team, with broad shoulders and a confident smile that made girls swoon and teachers overlook his bad behavior. He strutted down the halls like he owned the place, surrounded by friends who laughed at every joke he cracked, even if it came at someone else's expense. And lately, that someone had been Mia Thompson. Mia was quiet, with curly blonde hair that she often tucked behind her ears while reading during lunch. She sat alone most days, hunched over textbooks or scribbling notes in a worn-out notebook. To Ethan, she seemed nice enough, even if she rarely spoke unless spoken to. But to Jake and his crew, she was an easy target. Her hand-me-down clothes, second-hand backpack, and glasses made her stand out in all the wrong ways. One afternoon, Ethan was mopping the hallway near the cafeteria when he heard Jake's loud voice echo off the walls. He glanced up to see Jake standing over Mia, who sat at one of the round tables clutching her lunch tray. A small group of students had gathered around them, snickering as Jake leaned closer to Mia. "Hey, nerd," Jake said, his tone mocking. "What's with the outfit? Did your grandma pick it out for you?" Mia's cheeks turned red, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she stared at her lap, gripping the edge of her tray so tightly her knuckles turned white. The other students laughed, egging Jake on. Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. He hated seeing people bullied, but he also knew better than to get involved. Jake was trouble, and crossing him meant risking more than just embarrassment. It meant becoming his next target. But then Jake reached out and flicked the strap of Mia's backpack, sending it tumbling to the floor. Books spilled everywhere, and Mia scrambled to gather them before anyone stepped on them. Ethan clenched his mop handle tightly, anger bubbling inside him. This wasn't fair. Why should Mia have to deal with this just because she didn't fit in? Before he realized what he was doing, Ethan walked over and planted himself between Jake and Mia. The laughter stopped abruptly as everyone turned to look at him. Even Jake looked surprised, though only for a moment. "What do you want, janitor?" Jake sneered, crossing his arms over his chest. Come to clean up the mess? No, Ethan said firmly, meeting Jake's gaze. His heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. I'm here to tell you to leave her alone. For a second, silence filled the hallway. Then Jake smirked, shaking his head. You've got guts, I'll give you that. But you're messing with the wrong guy. With that, he shoved past Ethan, bumping his shoulder hard enough to make Ethan stumble. As Jake strode away, his friends followed, casting smug glances over their shoulders. When the crowd dispersed, Ethan bent down to help Mia collect her books. She hesitated at first, looking up at him with wide, uncertain eyes. You didn't have to do that, she murmured softly. Yes, I did, Ethan replied, handing her a textbook. No one deserves to be treated like that. Mia nodded slowly, still avoiding his gaze. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. There was something fragile about her, like she might break under the weight of the world at any moment. Ethan wondered how long she'd been dealing with this kind of treatment, and why no one else had stepped in to help Dot as they both stood up. Mia gave him a small, shy smile. I guess I'll see you around, she said before hurrying off down the hall. Ethan watched her go, feeling a strange mix of pride and unease. He'd stood up to Jake, which was something he'd never done before. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Jake wouldn't let something like this slide, not without retaliation. Later that evening, Ethan sat on the couch in their tiny apartment, staring at the TV without really watching it. His mom bustled around the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. She was short and wiry, with streaks of gray running through her dark hair. Despite the stress of working long hours, she always managed to keep a positive attitude, reminding Ethan that things would get better someday. How was school today? She asked, setting a plate of spaghetti in front of him. It was fine, Ethan replied, picking at his food. He debated telling her about what happened with Jake, but decided against it. She worried enough already. He didn't need to add to her burden. His mom studied him for a moment, her brow furrowing slightly. You sure? You seem distracted. I'm okay, Ethan assured her, forcing a smile. Just tired, I guess. She nodded, accepting his answer without pressing further. They ate in comfortable silence, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the gaps between bites. When they finished, Ethan cleared the dishes and headed to his room, where he flopped onto his bed and stared at the ceiling. He couldn't stop thinking about Mia. What must it feel like to go through life constantly being picked on, never knowing when the next insult or shove would come? He admired her resilience, the way she kept going despite everything. Maybe that was why he'd stepped in earlier, to show her that she wasn't completely alone. As sleep finally claimed him, Ethan drifted off with one thought lingering. His mind, tomorrow would bring new challenges, but maybe, just maybe, he could face them head on. After all, standing up for someone else, even if it meant risking himself, felt like the right thing to do.